Hey everyone, big news that could change education in the US. President Trump is expected to sign an executive order to shut down the Department of Education. If that happens, it could impact school funding, student loans, and who decides what gets taught. So what does this mean for you? Let's break it down. First, why is this happening? The argument for closing the department is that education should be handled by states, not the federal government. Supporters say the department wastes money and adds unnecessary bureaucracy without improving student outcomes. Critics argue that without federal oversight, education quality will vary even more from state to state, and programs that support low-income students and those with disabilities could be disrupted. Now, let's talk about what the Department of Education actually does. It manages federal student loans, provides funding for K-12 schools, and enforces civil rights laws to ensure equal access to education. Without it, those responsibilities would have to be transferred elsewhere, but how smoothly that happens is uncertain. There are also concerns about accountability. Without a single entity overseeing national education policy, will states prioritize funding for the most vulnerable students? One major concern is student loans. Right now, the Department of Education handles federal loans, which means it sets repayment plans, loan forgiveness programs, and borrower protections. If the department is eliminated, student loans could be moved to the Treasury Department, which may change how repayment works. Some worry that this could make it harder to qualify for income-based repayment or loan forgiveness programs. If you have student loans, this is something to keep an eye on because even small changes in how loans are managed can have a big impact. School funding is another major issue. Federal funding makes up about 10% of public school budgets, but that money is targeted toward low-income schools and special education programs. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, ensures that students with disabilities receive necessary support, while Title I funding helps schools in disadvantaged areas. If these programs are moved to another agency, there's a risk that funding could be reduced or distributed differently, leading to greater disparities between wealthier and poorer school districts. Another key question is what happens to education standards. Right now, the federal government helps set guidelines for things like testing, teacher qualifications, and curriculum recommendations. Without the Department of Education, states would have complete control, which could mean significant differences in how subjects like science, history, and math are taught across the country. Some see this as a good thing, allowing local communities to tailor education to their needs. Others worry that it could lead to weaker standards in some states, making it harder for students to compete in the workforce or apply to colleges in other states. Civil rights enforcement is another major concern. The Department of Education plays a role in ensuring schools do not discriminate based on race, gender, or disability. If the department is gone, these responsibilities might shift to the Justice Department, but critics worry that education-specific issues might not receive the same attention. This could affect policies related to special education, gender identity protections, and racial discrimination in schools. For those in favor of shutting down the department, the main argument is that states should have more control without federal interference. They believe local governments are better suited to understand community needs, and that removing federal oversight will allow for more flexibility and innovation in education. The idea is that by cutting out federal bureaucracy, schools can operate more efficiently. On the other hand, opponents argue that eliminating the department could create instability, weaken protections for students, and widen the gap between well-funded and underfunded schools. Without federal oversight, states may cut corners, leading to unequal education opportunities across the country. And when it comes to student loans, losing federal protections could mean fewer options for borrowers who are struggling to repay their debt. So what happens next? Even though Trump is expected to issue this executive order, Congress would still have to approve a lot of the changes, and that's not guaranteed. In the past, efforts to eliminate the Department of Education have failed due to political opposition and logistical challenges. Even if the department isn't completely shut down, its responsibilities could be significantly reduced, shifting control over education back to the states. Public reaction will also play a big role in what happens next. Polls show that most Americans do not support eliminating the Department of Education, and there's already strong opposition from teachers, parents, and education advocates. If enough people push back, lawmakers might reconsider their stance, especially if they think it could cost them votes. Meanwhile, states and school districts will have to prepare for potential changes, whether that means adjusting budgets, creating new policies, or figuring out how to manage federal education programs at the state level. If you're a student, a parent, or a teacher, it's important to stay informed about these changes. If you rely on federal student loans, pay close attention to how this transition could affect repayment plans. If you care about education funding in your community, now is the time to look into how local leaders are responding. And if you have concerns about how this might impact public schools, speaking up now could make a difference in how these policies take shape. So what do you think? Should the Department of Education be eliminated, or do you think it's necessary to keep it? Let me know in the comments, and as always, stay informed, stay aware, and take control of your future.